So I'm excited about fully funded foundation aid, even though we know that it's based on old census. And I'm looking forward to the amount of money we spend on community schools and CTE schools, and because I know for a fact that those are what work. What I am concerned about is no matter how many dollars we put into our education system, we see that our black and brown students are graduating at lower rates of their Asian and white counterparts. And so I'm just wondering, how much money is it going to take for our kids to catch up? What is the actual plan for black and brown students when it comes to funding? Like what is the actual plan? I don't ever see anything written, even though we all know that they're failing.
So let me start, and I'm glad you mentioned community schools, which is a model that we, I think the conversations is always about investments, right? And there are all these different models. I ran 218 in Washington Heights as the first community school in partnership with Children's Aid Society. That is a model that we somehow have, we invest a little bit and then we just walk away from it. For particular communities of color, it is a model that supports the family, supports the child. It is not just child-centered. It is community-centered. It's, many of those programs are open 6 days a week, provide GED, provide all kinds of services for the community, provide clinical and everything else.
We know the community schools work. I just
So,
want to get to
but the funding is, what I'm getting to is the issue of the funding.
Okay.
The funding, the issue of the funding happens, which is why we want to look at the formula. We have got to get to a place that, even though we keep saying there's investments and, how much is too much or not enough or whatever, the fact of the matter is that in society there are all of these endeavors, all of these issues that are very specific to schools that we fund. At the same time, when we give you a number and we say, it costs, $20,000 per child, that's just a general number. It matters as to where these dollars are going. And part of what we want to try to do is with Foundation Aid, new formula, is to be intentional and target. Not just to have a formula, to your point, but be very intentional and target those communities where the greatest needs are.
Hello, Commissioner. Always great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for visiting your old school law, government and justice after a student was stabbed, and I'm grateful to have your team. Mark is great. I love that you talked about safety today in the pivot. What was it? Pivot?
Project Pivot.
Project Pivot. I would love to hear more data about that.
Yep.
I did bring up safety with my, safety with my schools. My students are telling me that they don't feel as safe when they're leaving arrival and dismissal, because they may have one school safety officer and it's an older person that really can't do much if something really broke out. And one of the things that I brought to their attention, and I brought it to the mayor as well, is that maybe we should be having trusting adults there for arrival and dismissal instead of police presence, because that's what the students are saying they would not feel safe with.
That's right.
And so Project Pivot sounds like that would be what would be helpful for the arrival and dismissal piece and safety. So I just would love to know that'll be a part, if it's not already existing, that'll be a part of Project Pivot. But my questions are around other ways to keep our students safe and what you think this would cost. We've been talking about having schools open 24 hours. We know community schools work, we know CTEs work, and they work because they're wraparound. So if we had our schools open 24 hours where students can fall in, for whatever reasons they need to, I would like to know, is this something you all would be interested in? Can we create a cost analysis to figure this out? Any thoughts on our schools being open 24 hours? And then what funding or programs are needed to get more teachers of colors to teach students of color? We know that helps with graduation rates and that sort. So I'd just love to talk about those two things.
Well, listen, first of all, Member Jackson, thank you so much for raising this. This is the issue that keeps me up at night. And it is heartbreaking for me. These kids are not numbers for me, even when I don't know them. Every time I hear about another child that is shot or stabbed, it is beyond sad for me. It evokes a whole range of emotions that I have. I'm a father of 4 children, including my only daughter, who is a teacher at my original school, the Bronx School for Law, Government, and Justice in your district. My daughter, Aaliyah. And I go and I visit these schools, and I'm visiting these parents and the school communities. It is just, it's heart-wrenching of what is happening. And we're working really hard to try to get in front of this and figure it out. The proliferation of guns and the amount of guns and weapons. We have seen a significant uptick in weapons brought into our schools.
Thank you again for coming in front of us. As a social worker, licensed social worker that came out of a high school before I got here, during COVID, I did all of my grief counseling and all kind of counseling happening during then. I must say that suspensions don't work, and I understand there needs to be consequences for actions, but we have to figure out how to get students to, I guess, face consequences without taking them out of the classroom or away from an educational setting. Is there a cost that we incur when we suspend students? I'm just wondering why solutions, not suspensions, doesn't work. Is there some kind of cost related to it that says that this would not be sufficient? We can't do it?
I'll take a first. Thank you so much for your question, Assemblymember Jackson.
Yes.
I totally agree with you. As a parent of 4 public school children, that suspension, and a principal, suspensions alone do not work. I totally agree. I can't remember who asked earlier around what do we need as far as funding for mental health services for students. And I'll just give you a broad from our position, and it would be weird for folks to hear that I'm advocating for more of this, because it's true. We need to have schools where the ratio between guidance counselors and students is dramatically lower. It's what I did as a principal, where my guidance counselors, I didn't have the opportunity to hire social workers at the time, but I agree we need them. I'll talk more about that in a second. But I had one guidance counselor to 600 students. When I went from one guidance counselor to 225, my graduation rate over the years went from 62 to almost 90, because they need those services. Just to start, you need a social worker, at least one in every school, and other schools with higher needs of concentration need more than one social worker. So just sort of a baseline, those 2 things need to work together. If a child is suspended, just to bring them back without the services, it is not going to work.
Okay, and then I just have to shift very quickly. I hear that there's an issue with teachers of color not having enough, we're losing them. Is there any kind of track for us to work with HBCUs? They graduate people who are educators every single day. Is there any kind of track? Is there any kind of track to get educators into the field of social work and, to get people into education and social work straight out of high school? Is there any kind of track that we're funding?
I don't know if there's a track, but more definitely needs to be done. And Michael Mulgrew is committed to, in UFT, we're committed to working with SUNYs and CUNYs to try to create a pipeline so that folks can do their apprenticeship directly in the schools. And this way we can get them into classrooms a lot sooner.
We represent supervisors of social workers, and I totally agree with you. We need to expand the pool for many women of color there as well.
Thank
And we've also been working with all of our counterparts in many of the mental health associations to see what kind of unique arrangements we can make.
I'm hearing that Yonkers is doing great things. I'm just wondering, and I know Rochester is struggling, right, with their school system. So I'm just wondering, is there a cost per student that works and can be utilized in other areas? So what's the cost per student, I guess, in Yonkers that we've seen is working? And can we then duplicate that in other areas? And would that be part of the solution to getting better graduation rates in other areas?
Thank you, Assemblymember Jackson. And, that's such an interesting question. The per pupil expenditure in the city of Yonkers is an easy $25,000 per student. The state gives us under $8,000 per student. Yonkers is 272 on the list of per pupil appropriation for a city of our size. I think the concept of success is driven by the consistency that we put in place and by the funding that is appropriated. My colleagues are wonderful superintendents. They are new to their district. Fortunately, this is the 9th time that I'm coming before you. So consistency matters when we speak about success, and funding matters when we speak about success, and per pupil appropriation has to come to a level per student for us in our urban community that will exceed $25,000. You know, this concept of $10,000 in today's day and age with the needs of our students just doesn't work.
Got it. And my colleague from Rochester, is there anything that you think would be helpful in increasing your literacy and graduation rate when it comes to funding and finance?
Yeah, I believe that, once again, having the increased foundation aid, if we can maintain that money to continue to support literacy at the early grades would be extremely important. I just want to say from a set per pupil amount,
Yeah.
right? Our kids all carry different needs, different supports, different, you know, some of them are L's, some of them are students with disabilities, so it makes it really hard to kind of say that there's one set amount that could help. So I think funding in order to help our students with disabilities, our English language learners, we have a large percentage, upwards of 24% of students with disabilities, and we need to, you know, make sure that we have funding to support them as well.